Welcome. I would like to introduce myself to you. I have a really long Spanish name, but you can call me Jose. I teach technology courses at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard University here in Boston in the US. I was invited to teach a course here on graphic design. I believe what it says here is graphic design. Is that correct? All right, great. And I would like to give you a gentle introduction to what course is going to be about. If I speak too fast, you can let me know and I will slow down a little bit. What I would like to tell you tonight is that this course is going to be a course where I will teach you the fundamentals of graphic design, but instead of using the traditional tools that graphic designers use, our tool for this course is going to be computer programming. It's going to be code. And why is that? Traditionally, in the 20th century and before, graphic design has been very related to the arts and very strongly related to visual composition, color, and a lot of research that went into how can we use materials and physical things to make graphic design. Now, with the invention of computers, obviously the tools, people who were designers thought that computers had a lot of potential to also help them in graphic design. And therefore, during the course of many, many years, there were a lot of developments in figuring out how can we use computers to make better graphic design, and how can we use the languages that run inside of computers to make visual artifacts and communicate ideas in a better way. A lot of art from the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s explored the early potentials that computers had for expressing visual form and for communicating visual ideas. And all the way up until today, where a lot of artists are now finding in computers and in the things that you can do with computers, still a new and novel language that they can express themselves with. This is very important in the field of graphic design, in the field of art, in the field of architecture, or in any single field where creativity is important. Now, traditionally, as of these days, in the 21st century, the typical tools, the typical digital tools that graphic designers use when creating layouts, when creating logos, when creating two-dimensional objects are typically tools that have a very strong interface that you click on buttons and then you perform operations such as, for example, Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. I think those tools are great, but I think you have a lot of time and you will have a lot of opportunities to learn these tools in other places, because what I would like to share with you is a different kind of tool. It's a tool that uses computer programming and it uses code to generate form in a different way. And I think this is more interesting because it requires not only that you learn a particular interface like Photoshop or Illustrator, but it requires that you think in terms of the structure of your design, and you are able to express that language with computer programming, which I find super interesting. And I love, once you understand this technique, how wonderful and how powerful it can be. What I would like to do is I would like to show you some examples of the things that we will be learning in this course. So for example, I will show you techniques to understand when you are on a computer screen, what is the coordinate system that a computer uses to represent graphics. So I will show you the idea that horizontal is the X direction, vertical is the Y direction, and that with numbers that corresponds to the pixels on the screen, you can select locations and you can place objects and you can combine them together. I forgot to say, what we will be using, the programming language that we will be using in this course is called P5JS. And P5JS is a project that is specifically for visual artists and for graphic designers, and it's built on top of JavaScript, which is the programming language that runs on top of the browsers and on top of all the internet. What this means is that the work that you will be able to do here in this course, you will be able to put it online and you will be able to show it on a website. And therefore you will be able to share it with your family, your friends, potential employers, or schools that you want to apply with. So it doesn't have to be printed, but you will be able to have it online on the internet, on your website, on your portfolio, and share it with anybody that you want. So going back, I would like to teach you the basics of, for example, creating primitive shapes, creating simple shapes. For example, like this ones. What I'm going to do right now is that I'm going to go to the P5JS editor. I'm going to go to the P5JS editor, and I don't want you to do this. I just want to show you the things that we will be doing today. But I don't want you to do, I just want you to pay attention to me, okay? I will share all the code that I'm going to show today. I will share it with you by the end of the lecture, and you will be able to use it and look at it and play with it by the end of the lecture, okay? So what you see here on this side is a very simple program that creates a canvas of 600 by 600 pixels, all right? And if I execute this program, you can see that that canvas shows up on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, if you look at the code, it's very simple to understand that I'm setting the color of the background, and I will explain in the course why 128 means a gray color. I will explain, and it's very easy to see how, for example, here, I'm drawing a square, a rectangle, a circle, and an ellipse. Square, a rectangle, a circle, and an ellipse. What these numbers mean, they mean the location on the screen, on the canvas, and the dimensions of these objects. So it's very easy to understand as well. But all those things will be the things that we will be learning in this course. I'm going to go back. I would also like to show you, to teach you the fundamentals of computer color and how computers represent all the spectrum of colors that we can see in nature. If you're familiar with computers, the only thing that computers really understand is numbers. So we need to find a way just to define that the color red, the color green, the color blue have like a certain numerical representation. So if I go to the same program, but with colors, you can see that the only thing that I've done is before I draw each one of those squares, here I set the fill color to be 0. I fill the fill color to be 250, which means red. And these are the things that we will learn in the course, why this means red, why this means green, and why this means blue. I would also like to show you interesting applications of how can you work with those colors and with those rules and apply interactivity so that using interactivity, you can create graphical compositions that are much more interesting than the simple rules that you could apply with static programs, such as, for example, Photoshop or Illustrator, like the ones that I showed before. So for example, if I go to this program that I also wrote on my online editor, okay, you can see what I will show you is that in this program, what I'm doing is I am drawing 4 lines from the 4 corners of my screen, okay? But I'm drawing them to the center of the mouse. So as I do this, you can see that I am moving my mouse and that I'm constantly drawing lines that change color. So for example, from yellow to red to green to black, and that they overlay on top of the canvas. And and you can see also that the colors are fading away. That is because I am fading them away over time. But if I did this, for example, if I remove those lines of code, what you will be able to see is that now I can run this and all the lines stay on top of the canvas. And therefore I just created this super simple interactive design and graphic drawing tool with, what is that, 16 lines of code? How awesome is this, right? These kind of things are very difficult to do with other static software, like for example, Adobe and Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator. Also, I should mention, all the tools that we're going to be using in this course are free. So you will not have to pay a single dollar for to use any of this stuff. Now, what becomes really interesting is that there are a lot of things that you can do with these kind of techniques. Like for example, that idea of using the mouse to draw on top of the screen, you can extend it to a more complex situation where by moving the mouse really fast, I can draw lines between where the mouse was before and where the mouse is now. And therefore I can create a small sketching tool that you or that anybody who visits your website could use to draw something on the screen. I can, for example, I can draw something, and then I can change the color, and I can say, hello. Oh, and then I can just get like a full screen image of my canvas. Now, we can use typography as well as something that is expressive and that can send an important message. The idea is that typography are shapes that have been designed to accommodate letters or symbols in a particular language. And those are things that we can also use in graphic design to even reinforce the expressiveness of the message that we're sending. So for example, I can create a very simple tool that will display a message on the screen, like for example, graphic design. But things that I can use and I can implement, and I can use a particular typography that I have loaded, that I just downloaded from the internet and that I uploaded. But there are many things that I can do now here. So for example, I can implement the fact that this message may automatically rotate over time. So for example, here, I can animate my typography by just implementing a simple rule where I design a value for an angle and I rotate the line, the virtual line, where this text is going to be displayed. But there are even more things that I can do. I can, maybe if instead of automatically rotating every frame, what I do is I want to rotate the text according to where my mouse is. I can also do that very simple. So for example, you see here, depending on where my mouse is, my text is following. And I can add even more effects to this. So I can add the effect that instead of that, I can create like a trail over the text so that I can create this like small halo animation over the word graphic design, which it conveys a more powerful message and it keeps the attention of the user as well. Or I can combine that, and instead of doing automatically, I can do it with my mouse so that it becomes not just a powerful message, but also a playful experience to whomever is visiting your website. And you definitely will be doing a much better job at keeping their attention, obviously, which is a lot of the thing, is a lot of the core of why you want to put energy and effort on graphic design. We will learn some techniques that are particular to computer programming, and that it just so happens that they're very useful when it comes to making compositions and when it comes to generating a lot of form and a lot of shapes in an automated way. Imagine if you were in Illustrator and you wanted to draw a lot of cubes, you would have to manually draw a rectangle and start copy pasting it to create a matrix. And then if you wanted to give them a small rotation to each one of them, you would have to do that manually. With computer programming, you can write rules that define the relationship between these elements in a very simple, very short way, and it creates like a very powerful impact. So for example, a very simple example here is I can create a very simple program where what I do is I divide my canvas in 5 different quadrants. And then I create rectangles with colors that are changing in intensity as they move on top of the canvas. Doing this in Illustrator or in other typical programming language and in other typical software would have taken a lot of time and a lot of manual effort. Here, you can do that as simple as with 5 lines of code. And I would like to iterate that a lot of this code is actually comments. It's just to explain what you are looking at. So if it can look even much leaner, much cleaner, if you just remove all those comments. Even though comments are really good because they help you keep track of what you're looking at, and they help as reminders of why you wrote certain things. The idea is that you can create static images and you can create static compositions like the ones that I'm showing here. But you can also write a little bit of more logic into this program so that this composition of rectangles with a gradient color is not static, but it's also dynamic and interactive with the user. So for example, if I go here and I look at the exact same program, but with a program that is responsive to my mouse. So what you can see is that as I move my mouse, the size of the squares corresponds to where my mouse is. So you can see that the first black rectangle has the size of my mouse on the screen. And therefore, if I move it, I can create compositions that are, for example, just vertical red bars into a gradient. Or if I move the other way, I can do vertical, horizontal, blue bars up to a gradient. Or if I move in 2 dimensions, you can see that I can get the full spectrum of color with the squares just by writing a simple few logic rules. How cool is that, huh? Now, that can be applied to color, it can be applied to form, but it can be applied to animations as well. Some of the more interesting things that happen in graphic design is that when you supersede the idea that your element is static, and what you want is you want to create graphic design that is animated and that is responsive to the user. So for example, if you wanted to create a matrix, a 2-dimensional matrix of rectangles, that each one of them being like slightly rotated in front of the, from the previous one, doing this manually would take like an enormous amount of time. However, again, writing simple rules that, that define how this matrix can, how each one of these elements can move a little bit on top of each other is very simple. And I can actually activate other rules that would make it responsive to the user. So for example, you can see here that as I move my mouse, the angle between the squares, how they rotate on top of each other changes very, very slightly. And therefore I can explore all the range of forms and all the range of possibilities that this tiny sketch is giving me. And this could be a design, for example, for, I don't know, for the background of your website. It could be a design for paper, to wrap a gift. It could be a design for a lot of many things. I don't know. I'm losing track of time, Dido. So when we want to make the pause, can you please interrupt me? Yes, just interrupt me, okay? Whenever you want to take the break. And this idea of using animations to create patterns and to create form is very important because it is at the core of all the flexibility and all the power that computer programming can give you as a graphic designer. So for example, if we play with a very simple example where what I'm going to create is I'm going to create something that is, it looks closer to a small video game than it is to actual graphic design. So what you can see here is that I designed this thing that is, it's a simple circle that is bouncing off the borders of my screen. And so it looks like a small video game. It's this ball that is playing around, etc. But if I change just one single line of code, and that line of code was the fact that every frame I am cleaning the screen and I'm drawing again, if instead of doing that, I left all the drawings on the screen that I've been doing over and over, then a very interesting effect happens, which is the accumulation of all the drawings that the computer has done of this circle. And therefore, if we let this play over time, then we would get this really interesting growing pattern of hexagons and circles on top of these hexagons, which I also think that could be like a very interesting, if we play a little bit with color and with form, it could be also like a very interesting, I don't know, paper, background, screensaver, I don't know, you name it. So in computer graphics, colors are represented with 3 numbers because in computer graphics on screens, on TVs, colors are composed of the 3 main primary colors, which are red, green, and blue. And then any color is a combination of some tones of each one of those 3 colors. So for example, a orange color has a lot of red, a little bit of green, and a little bit of blue. Whereas, for example, yellow has a lot of green, a lot of blue, and no red, you know? So all the colors in between are done by mixing different amounts of red, green, and blue. And it just so happens that for reasons that are a bit longer to explain, the range of those colors goes from 0 to 255. So a full red color is 255 red, 0 green, and 0 blue. And then a lot of combinations of these values. Okay, so I would like to finish this by showing some other examples of things that we will learn and things that can be done at the intersection of graphic design and computer programming, and so that maybe they inspire you. And then you can see the kind of things that we will be exploring through this course. The idea that I just showed, the fact that, for example, you can implement you can implement a ball that bounces off the screen. If you multiply that effect and you add colors and you add form, then there's like a lot of creative potential in the idea that you can do, like Lucy very smartly said, you can start moving from static graphic design to something that we like calling generative graphic design. And what's important about generative graphic design is that what you program is not the form, but what you program is the rules that generate that form over time. And I think that is extremely interesting. I think this is extremely powerful, and it's the kind of things that I would like to explore with you in this course. So for example, what we did in this example is we took the idea of the bouncing ball, but we just added many more of those objects and we changed their colors and we bounced them up so that once you do that, you get this playful visualization. I think you might be seeing the video a little choppy, but you can see how we have like all these random colors and all these random balls moving around. It can create an interesting pattern, but even more, as I said, if instead of cleaning the screen every frame and then drawing again on top of it, if we leave the marks, if we leave the footprints of all these circles moving around, then we get a super interesting effect like this one. You can see that just by changing one simple line of code, we have tremendously changed the visualization of and created this like really colorful overlay of moving objects on top of the screen. This, if we took a snapshot, it could be like a super interesting thing to print. If we put this online, it could be the background of your website. It could be a screensaver. It could be a lot of things, you know? This is the power of digital technologies. But not just this, if we, on top of this, implemented interactivity with the user, then things become way more interesting. So for example, let me go to this other example where the principle is very similar. So you're going to see that we have a lot of circles. It's just that instead of bouncing from the border of the screen. Now what they're doing is they're jumping right somewhere, they're getting to a new target, and then they're jumping to another target, and then jumping to another target. They're like flies. They're like, whoop, 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 whoop. But what's interesting about this is that they are also responsive to the user. So I can click, for example, here on the center, and as I do, they're all going to try to go to what I tell them to do, like, whoo. And when they reach there, they all start exploding and moving around again. I also can change this one line of code to make sure that the result is always on the screen. So you guys can see how it looks like fireworks that are exploding. And I can also still move them to the center and ask them to go all the way to the center. This is really playful and really fun. I'm going to, I think, where am I? Yes. Similarly, it doesn't have to be balls. It can be any kind of graphical object that you can think on. So an object that moves randomly around the screen is usually referred to as a random walker. And if what you do is like you leave the print of this random walker that is changing direction randomly as it moves to the screen, then then you can also create these growing patterns on the screen that very strongly reflect the idea that we have been discussing, which is the generation of graphic design. Drawing this manually would have been close to impossible, but writing simple rules that populate and that create all these objects and move them around is very easy. This program has 50 lines of code, right? And look at how powerful, how visually powerful this program is, right? Or you can create objects that have, with very simple rules of mathematics and trigonometry, they have some kind of perceived agency. They look like they are almost like alive. So for example, here, I have created these objects that I call creepers, and they start from the center. And what I have done is I have implemented a very simple rule where they always keep walking forward, but then they change their angle slightly, jittering a little bit. Therefore, it looks like it's like a field full of tiny creepers and animals or ants or whatever you call them, or bugs. But again, if we, instead of using them as something that looks like a video game, we use them as elements that are drawing a pattern on top of the screen, then we get this really magnificent effect of like the path and the trajectories of all these objects on top of each other, which I find super, super interesting and super compelling, right? And last but not least, you can also play with the webcam. So for example, because the webcam, what it does is taking an image of yourself, and an image is nothing else than a two-dimensional array of pixels. And each one of those pixels has a color that is represented, like we just discussed. It is represented with 3 numbers, the red, the green, and the blue. You can work with those numbers and you can perform operations to create playful effects. So for example, I don't know if this is going to work because I don't know how many webcams I have in my system and if everything is working. Let's see. Yep. So you can see that right now I'm looking at the webcam of the computer that I have here on the side, and then I'm reading all the values, and I'm only taking the ones, and I'm reading all the pixels on the webcam, and I'm only drawing the ones that are changing in brightness, that are changing in colors very rapidly, so that if I stand and I don't move, then I disappear. But then if I move, then I show up on top of the screen. And this is just because of a very, very simple numerical rule with the pixels with the colors of the pixels that are on the screen. So I think this was the last example. I'm going to share here on the screen. I'm going to share here on the chat. Right now, where is the chat? Where do I have the chat? Where is the chat? Okay, I don't know where the chat is. I think I've lost it. No, here. Here is the chat. All right. Okay. I just posted on the chat a link to what you're seeing here, which is the list of all the examples that I just showed. And what's super powerful about this is because everything runs on the web. You don't have to install anything. You don't have to download anything. You can just click on each one of these. You can just click on each one of these. You can hit play, and then it will run on your screen. All right. So you're welcome to play with these examples, to see if you like them, to see if like you can change the code a little bit and see if like you can change the colors or like you can change the behavior of some of these objects, and then and see if like this is something that you might be interested on, if they might be interested in or not. Something that I would like to show you, if you want to see more examples of what can be done, there is a really good website called openprocessing.org, which is a repository of, which is an online repository where people take this code that I have shown you, they put it here, and then it can be run on the browser. And you can see really, really cool examples of what can be done with computer graphics and by writing very simple rules of code. So for example, you see this like somehow this is responding to my mouse and I can stop it now, but then if I move my mouse to the right, it's moving forward, etc., etc. You know, this is super, super cool. You know, why would anybody want to do Photoshop when you can write code, right? I mean, at least that's what I think. And yeah, and a couple of reminders before I pass it on to Lucy, because Lucy, as she mentioned, she took my class last semester and she did a really, really cool project that was using some P5.js. And I would like to share, and I would like to invite her to share some of that with us. But before we do that, I have a couple of reminders. So this that you might be attending is a college degree course, which means that you will earn credit by taking this course, which means that this is credit that you can use for your future education. So if you take this class now, it's a class that you will not need to take in the future. You will be learning directly from me. I will be teaching this course. I will be with Lucy's help, who has a lot of experience in P5.js and in computational design in general. I will teach you a lot of the techniques that I showed you today. We will play with form, we will play with color, we will play with animation, and we will play with interactivity. And the last week of the course, you will be doing, with our help, you will be doing a final graphic design project, okay? It will be something that you will choose what to do. If you don't know what you want to do, we will help you find a topic. And then it will be something that you will be working for the full week with our help. You will be presenting your progress. And then hopefully by the end, you will have a piece of work that will be a nice thing for you to include in your design portfolio. Because if you are interested in design, design portfolios are a super, super important part of your applications to jobs, to universities, to the degree programs. And I can tell you because I do admissions in my university. So, and that's one of the first things that we look when it comes to designers. And it's also something that you will be, because you will be learning web-based technologies. It will be something that you will be able to put on your website and that anybody with a link will be able to access without installing anything, without downloading anything, just like you saw today. And last but not least, you will learn the fundamentals of computer programming. We will not go very deep because computer programming is a huge topic, but you will learn the basics, and you will learn the basics on how to do that online on a browser so that it can serve as an introduction to computer science. And if you're interested in that, then you can take other classes to learn properly how to program in other programming languages and how to be an expert programmer. I just want to say that computer programming these days is a really, really marketable skill. So if you're interested in finding jobs, there are tons and tons of jobs that involve writing code. So maybe this could be like a gentle introduction for you to learn if this is something that you might be interested in the future or not, especially because since we will not be doing things that are a little more difficult to perceive and not so playful, we will be doing a lot of things that are visual and graphical, and that is usually like a much more fun introduction to the art of programming. All right. And with that, I'm going to stop it here.